All right, I'm live. That's good. Give it just a minute to have some people join. I think I will be reading from the work Games People Play by Eric Berne. This is a very interesting book on the psychology of human relationships. Unfortunately, it does not have anything about the relationship between one and their cat, who is currently behaving very badly. What can you do? And this book is old. I've had it for a long time. It's starting to get a little bit worn. I have quite a few books like this. Printed in 1964. All right, so let's see. So we'll be starting on page 73, looking at different life games in this book. So 73. Almost there. Okay, so this is from chapter 6. My microphone's set up a little bit better. No one has joined us as of yet. Alas, it's not my usual time, but I have a few days off this week, so I am enjoying them, doing things in my own time, as it were. What have you gotten into? Oh dear, oh dear. Is that one of the Christmas decorations? Oh, yep, it is. Cats love Christmas decorations. I think it's one of their favorite pastimes. I mean, who would, they're small. They can be batted about. They're often interesting colors, shiny. What's not to like if you're a little kitty? I mean, really, I can't blame him for liking the Christmas decorations, which I have yet to put out. But it's not December yet. But anyway, I will be getting started reading now, I think. Chapter 6 is titled Life Games. All games have an important and probably decisive influence on the destinies of the players under ordinary social conditions, but some offer more opportunities than others for lifelong careers and are more likely to involve relatively innocent bystanders. This group may be conveniently called life games. It includes alcoholic, debtor, kick me, now I've got you, you son of a bee, and see what you made me do, and their principal variants. They merge on the one side with marital games and on the other with those of the underworld. Oh, hello, Kirk. Kirk, that's nice. Kirk is here, and he says, I'm cute. Thank you. Number 1, alcoholic. Thesis. In game analysis, there is no such thing as alcoholism or an alcoholic. But there is a role called the alcoholic in a certain type of game. If a biochemical or physiological abnormality is the prime mover in excessive drinking, and that is still open to some question, then its study belongs in the field of internal medicine. Game analysis is interested in something quite different: the kinds of social transactions that are related to such excesses, hence the game alcoholic. In its full flower, this is a 5-handed game, although the roles may be condensed so that it starts off and terminates as a 2-handed one. The central role is that of the alcoholic, the one who is it, played by White. The chief supporting role is that of persecutor, typically played by a member of the opposite sex, usually the spouse. What have you gotten into? He's wilding out. Really? Oh my goodness. He's very angry that I didn't feed him before going live. But I told him it's not time yet. It's too early to be fed. Anyway, where was I? Okay. And the third role is that of the rescuer, usually played by someone of the same sex, often the good family doctor, who is interested in the patient and also in drinking problems. In the classical situation, the doctor successfully rescues the alcoholic from his habit. After White has not taken a drink for 6 months, they congratulate each other. The following day, White is found in the gutter. The fourth role is that of the patsy or dummy. In literature, this is played by the delicatessen man who extends credit to White, gives him a sandwich on the cuff, and perhaps a cup of coffee, without either persecuting him or trying to rescue him. In life, this is more frequently played by White's mother, who gives him money and often sympathizes with him about the wife who does not understand him. In this aspect of the game, White is required to account in some plausible way for his need for money by some project in which both pretend to believe, although they know what he is really going to spend most of the money for. Sometimes the patsy slides over into another role, which is a helpful but not essential one, the agitator, the good guy who offers supplies without even being asked for them. Come have a drink with me, and you will go downhill faster. The ancillary professional in all drinking games is the bartender or liquor clerk. In the game Alcoholic, he plays the fifth role, the connection, the direct source of supply, who also understands alcoholic talk, and who, in a way, is the most meaningful person in the life of any addict. The difference between the connection and the other players is the difference between professionals and amateurs in any game. The professional knows when to stop. At a certain point, a good bartender refuses to serve the alcoholic, who is then left without any supplies until he can locate a more indulgent connection. In the initial stages of Alcoholic, the wife may play all three supporting roles. At midnight, the patsy, undressing him, making him coffee, and letting him beat up on her. In the morning, the persecutor, berating him for the evil of his ways. In the evening, the rescuer, pleading with him to change them. In later stages, due sometimes to organic deterioration, the persecutor and the rescuer can be dispensed with, but are tolerated if they are also willing to act as sources of supply. White will go to the mission house and be rescued if he can get a free meal there, or he will stand for a scolding, amateur or professional, as long as he can get a handout afterward. Present experience indicates that the payoff in Alcoholic, as is characteristic of games in general, comes from the aspect to which most investigators pay least attention. In the analysis of this game, drinking itself is merely an incidental pleasure having added advantages. The procedure leading up to the real culmination, which is the hangover, it is the same in the game of schlemiel. The mess making, which attracts the most attention, is merely a pleasure-giving way for White to lead up to the crux, which is obtaining forgiveness from Black. For the alcoholic, the hangover is not as much the physical pain as the psychological torment. The two favorite pastimes of drinking people are martini, how many drinks and how many were mixed, and morning after, let me tell you about my hangover. Martini is played for the most part by social drinkers. Many alcoholics prefer a hard round of psychological morning after, and organizations such as AA offer him an unlimited opportunity for this. Hello, yes, I repeat. Good to see you. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Whenever one patient visited his psychiatrist after a binge, he would call himself all sorts of names. The psychiatrist said nothing. Later, recounting these visits in a therapy group, White said with smug satisfaction that it was the psychiatrist who had called him all those names. Yeah, this is the main conversational interest of many alcoholics in the therapeutic situation is not their drinking, which they apparently mention mostly in deference to their persecutors, but their subsequent suffering. The transactional object of the drinking, aside from the personal pleasures it brings, is to set up a situation where the child can be severely scolded, not only by the internal parent, but by any parental figures in the environment who are interested enough to oblige. I don't know if any of you have known any alcoholics. I mean, it's hard to get through life without, but is any of this sounding familiar to you? Because it's it's hitting a lot of, when you see it as a game, and we'll go into other games that people play that are, similar, but when you see it from that angle, it's like you kind of understand, like, you don't have to play the game. When you actually see that there's roles and things that you can step into or step out of, you take away power from the game that's being played. Anyway, hence the therapy of this game should be concentrated not on the drinking, but on the morning after, the self-indulgence and self-castigation. There is a type of heavy drinker, however, who does not have hangovers, and such people do not belong in the present category. Hey! Okay, one moment. We're going to just take a moment. I'll be right back, y'all. We're reading Games People Play by Eric Berne. Okay, I have to deal with this charming feline of mine who is demanding to be fed and will not rest until he is. So, one moment. Okay, thank you for indulging our brief intermission there. The feline, well, he demanded and he would not relent until I gave in. So it is what it is. He was going to make it very difficult for me to concentrate on my reading otherwise. So. Oh, you're a recovering addict. 7 years. That's awesome. Congratulations on 7 years of recovery. Addicts are masters at falling into traps of self-victimization and self-sabotage. Yeah, I don't know how people deal with it, honestly. It becomes so impossible. But again, there's people who actually enjoy this game and will play it. And that's part of why it can often take years for addicts until they like really get out of control to get any help, because there are people who like playing these games with them. Well, at least when it comes to alcoholism. Okay, there is also a game, Dry Alcoholic, in which White goes through the process of financial or social degradation without a bottle, making the same sequence of moves and requiring the same supporting cast. Here again, the morning after is the crux of the matter. Indeed, it is the similarity between Dry Alcoholic and regular alcoholic, which emphasizes that both are games. For example, the procedure for getting discharged from a job is the same in both. Addict is similar to alcoholic, but more sinister, more dramatic, more sensational, and faster. In our society, at least, it leans more heavily on the readily available persecutor, with patsies and rescuers being few and far between, and the connection playing a much more central role. There are a variety of organizations involved in alcoholic, some of them national or even international in scope, others local. Many of them publish rules for the game. Nearly all of them explain how to play the role of alcoholic. Take a drink before breakfast, spend money allotted for other purposes, etc. They also explain the function of the rescuer. Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, continues playing the actual game, but concentrates on inducing the alcoholic to take the role of rescuer. Former alcoholics are preferred because they know how the game goes, and hence are better qualified to play the supporting role than people who have never played before. Cases have been reported of a chapter of AA running out of alcoholics to work on, whereupon the members resumed drinking since there was no other way to continue the game in the absence of people to rescue. Whoa. Yes, I repeat, says, I hate the game. That's why I got out. And yes, alcoholics are a special kind, especially dry alcoholics. Yeah, when I first heard the term dry alcoholic, like a lot of things clicked for me. Because just because someone is no longer, drinking, they still do the same sorts of things. Like the alcohol was never the problem. It was this psychological need to, I don't know, go through the game. In fact, I think the game becomes more apparent when alcohol isn't involved. It really does. There are also organizations devoted to improving the lot of the other players. Some put pressure on the spouses to shift their roles from persecutor to rescuer. The one which seems to come closest to the theoretical ideal of treatment deals with teenage offspring of alcoholics. These young people are encouraged to break away from the game itself rather than merely shift their roles. The psychological cure of an alcoholic also lies in getting him to stop playing the game altogether, rather than simply change from one role to another. In some cases, this has been feasible, although it is a difficult task to find something else as interesting to the alcoholic as continuing his game. Since he is classically afraid of intimacy, The substitute may have to be another game rather than a game-free relationship. Oh man, that really hits home. Wow. Wow. It's been years since I've read this book. I'm glad I kind of took it out today, because that's like, they are classically afraid of intimacy, aren't they? They really are. Like, you can't really be intimate with an alcoholic. It's always a game. Wow. Okay. Often so-called cured alcoholics are not very stimulating company socially, and possibly they feel a lack of excitement in their lives and are continually tempted to go back to their old ways. The criterion of a true game cure is that the former alcoholic should be able to drink socially without putting himself in jeopardy. The usual total abstinence cure will not satisfy the game analyst. Yeah, I don't know about that. I would not. Drinking isn't necessary. You know, people like there is a lot of pressure in this culture to drink generally. And if you don't participate, you're kind of, I don't know, like I don't drink. I mean, I do very rarely, like one or two a year, like a cocktail I'll have when I'm out, but like I generally abstain just because it's hard to drink. I just find it hard on the body. Like I don't enjoy being drunk. Like, but there is so much pressure. But you don't have to drink. You know, you don't have to drink. We don't at all. And I don't need to drink to have fun. I'm able to have fun without drinking. It's like I'm fun. I don't know. But there's a lot of people who can't. I don't know, or they can't. I don't know, loosen up or something. I don't know. It's not always a good idea for them to do. Oh wow. Dry alcoholics are scary, almost predatory. Yeah, they are. I don't suggest trying to win by drinking occasionally. No, it's best just not to. I agree. I agree with you. I mean, I can see like a true test, but I don't know. I do think there is also, some people respond to alcohol differently than others, you know, and I think that's a part of it as well. No, go ahead and talk. I went live because I wanted people to discuss what I'm reading. You know, I wanted to hear other people's thoughts about it. Okay, so let's see. It is apparent from the description of this game that there is a strong temptation for the rescuer to play, "I'm only trying to help you," and for the persecutor to play, "Look what you've done to me," and for the patsy to play, "Good Joe." With the rise of rescue organizations which publicize the idea that alcoholism is a disease, alcoholics have been taught to play wooden leg. The law, which takes a special interest in such people, tends to encourage this nowadays. The emphasis has shifted from the persecutor to the rescuer, from "I am a sinner" to "What do you expect from a sick man?" Part of the trend in modern thinking away from religion and towards science. From an existential point of view, the shift is questionable, and from a practical point of view, it seems to have done little to diminish the sale of liquor to heavy drinkers. Nevertheless, Alcoholics Anonymous is still, for most people, the best initiation into the therapy of overindulgence. Antithesis. As it is well known, alcoholic is usually played hard and is difficult to give up. In one case, a female alcoholic in a therapy group participated very little until she thought she knew enough about the other members, oh my goodness, to go ahead with her game. She then asked them to tell her what they thought of her. Since she had behaved pleasantly enough, various members said nice things about her, but she protested. That's not what I want. I want to know what you really think. She made it clear that she was seeking derogatory comments. The other women refused to persecute her, whereupon she went home and told her husband that if she took another drink, he must either divorce her or send her to a hospital. He promised to do this, and that evening she became intoxicated, and he sent her to a sanitarium. Here, the other members refused to play the persecutory roles White assigned to them. She was unable to tolerate this antithetical behavior. In spite of everyone's efforts to reinforce whatever insight she had already obtained, at home she found someone who was willing to play the role she demanded. Isn't that funny? So she's in her therapy group for alcoholics, and they refuse to persecute her. And she goes to her husband and says, if I drink, you must either divorce me or send me to a hospital. And he agrees. And that gave her permission to indulge in drinking. Oh, goodness. They want to be that, like they want, it's like this desire to be treated badly. In other cases, however, it appears possible to prepare the patient sufficiently so that the game can be given up and to attempt a true social cure in which the therapist declines to play either persecutor or rescuer. It is equally untherapeutic for him to play the role of patsy by allowing the patient to forego his financial and punctuality obligations. The correct therapeutic procedure from a transactional point of view is, after careful preliminary groundwork, to take an adult contractual position and refuse to play any of the roles, hoping that the patient will be able to tolerate not only abstinence from drinking, but also from playing his game. If he cannot, he is best referred to a rescuer. Antithesis is particularly difficult because the heavy drinker is highly regarded in most Western countries as a desirable object for censure, concern, or generosity, and someone who refuses to play any of these roles tends to arouse public indignation. A rational approach may be even more alarming to the rescuers than the alcoholic, sometimes with unfortunate consequences to the therapy. In one clinical situation, a group of workers were seriously interested in the game alcoholic and were attempting to effect real cures by breaking up the game rather than merely rescuing the patients. As soon as this became apparent, they were frozen out by the lay committee, which was backing the clinic, and none of them was ever called on to assist in treating the patients. Relatives. An interesting byplay in alcoholic is called have one. This was discovered by a perceptive student of industrial psychiatry. White and his wife, a non-drinking persecutor, go on a picnic with Black and his wife, who are both patsies. White says to the Blacks, have one. If they have one, this gives White license to have 4 or 5. Now, I've been caught in this game before. It's like you drinking. If they can pressure you, who doesn't generally drink or want to drink, if they can pressure you to do it, then that gives them permission to do it, and they always go overboard. You're like, oh, I had 1 and you've had 5. Okay. The game is unmasked if the Blacks refuse. Yes. White by the rules of drinking, which is why you should never give in when somebody pressures you to drink. If you don't want to drink and someone is pressuring you, it's a strong indication that they want you to play the game with them. Like, don't give in. If you're kind of like, should I not? Like, that's different. But if you didn't want to drink or you don't want to drink, don't. Okay, the game is unmasked if the blacks refuse. White, by the rules of drinking, is then entitled to be insulted, and he will find more compliant companions for his next picnic. What appears at the social level to be adult generosity is at the psychological level an act of insolence, whereby White's child obtains parental indulgence from Black by open bribery under the very nose of Mrs. White, who is powerless to protest. Actually, it is just because she will be powerless, quote unquote, to protest that Mrs. White consents to the whole arrangements, since she is just as anxious for the game to continue with herself in the role of persecutor as Mr. White is with himself in the role of alcoholic. Her recriminations against him in the morning after the picnic are easy to imagine. This variant can cause complications if White is Black's boss. Oh dear, yes it can. In general, and that is common with bosses, isn't it? Like, you ever go to like a work function and then it's like the higher ups that are like pressuring you to drink, and I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. In general, the patsy is not as badly off as the name implies. Patsies are often lonely people who have a great deal to gain by being nice to alcoholics. The delicatessen man who plays Good Joe makes many acquaintances in this way, and he can get a good reputation in his own social circle, not only as a generous person, but as a good storyteller. One variant of Good Joe, incidentally, is to go around asking for advice about how best to help people. This is an example of a jolly and constructive game worth encouraging. Its inverse is Tough Guy, taking lessons in violence or asking for advice about how best to hurt people. Although the mayhem is never put into practice, the player has the privilege of associating with real tough guys who are playing for keeps and can bask in their reflected glory. This is one species of what the French call un fanfaron device. Unfanfaron device. Okay. Analysis. Thesis, how bad I've been. See if you can stop me. Aim, self-castigation. Roles, alcoholic, persecutor, rescuer, patsy, connection. Dynamics, oral deprivation. Examples. 1. See if you can catch me. The prototypes of this game are difficult to correlate because of its complexity. Children, however, particularly children of alcoholics, often go through many of the maneuvers characteristic of the alcoholic. See if you can stop me, which involves lying, hiding things, seeking derogatory comments, looking for helpful people, finding a benevolent neighbor who will give you free handouts, etc. Self-castigation is often postponed to later years. 2. The alcoholic and his circle. Social paradigm, adult. Adult, tell me what you really think of me or help me stop drinking. Adult, I'll be frank with you. Psychological paradigm, parent and child. Child, see if you can stop me. Parent, you must stop drinking because. Moves, provocation, accusation, or forgiveness. 2. Indulgence, anger, or disappointment. Advantages. 1. Internal psychological. A. Drinking as in a procedure, rebellion, reassurance, and satisfaction of craving. B. Alcoholic as a game. Self-castigation, probable. 2, external psychological avoidance of sexual and other forms of intimacy. 3, internal social, see if you can stop me. 4, external social, morning after, martini, and other pastimes. 5, biological, alternating loving and angry exchanges. 6, existential, everybody wants to deprive me. Okay, let's see. It's just an interesting stream to tune into. I bet, yeah. I moved away from Narcotics Anonymous about 3 years into recovery. I've just been thinking about this concept lately. The rescuer dynamic is so true. I don't get it. I've judged myself enough. I shudder at the thought of inviting it. Yes, me too. It comes down to addicts crave chaos. It's one of the most important things you have to overcome. If you keep people around you that create chaos, you'll never get better. Indeed. All right, so the next game that we're going to read about is called Debtor. You know, somebody who is in debt, a debtor. Thesis. Debtor is more than a game. In America, it tends to become a script, a plan for a whole lifetime, just as it does in some of the jungles of Africa and New Guinea. There, the relatives of a young man buy him a bride at an enormous price, putting him in their debt for years to come. Here, the same custom prevails, at least in the more civilized sections of the country, except the bride price becomes a house price. And if there is no stake from the relatives, this role is taken on by the bank. Thus, the young man in New Guinea, with an old wristwatch dangling from his ear to ensure success, and the young man in America, with a new wristwatch wrapped around his arm to ensure success, both feel that they have a purpose in life. The big celebration, the wedding or housewarming, takes place not when the debt is just charged, but when it is undertaken. What is emphasized on TV, for example, is not the middle-aged man who has finally paid off his mortgage, but the young man who moves into his new home with his family, proudly waving the papers he has just signed, and which will bind him for most of his productive years. Oh, I just lost my spot. Hold on. After he has paid his debts, the mortgage, the college expenses for his children, and his insurance, he is regarded as a problem, a senior citizen for whom society must provide not only material comforts, but a new purpose. As in New Guinea, if he is very shrewd, he may become a big creditor instead of a big debtor, but this happens relatively rarely. As this is written, a sow bug crawls across the desk. If he is turned over on his back, one can observe the tremendous struggle he goes through to get on his feet again. During this interval, he has a purpose in his life. When he succeeds, one can almost see the look of victory on his face. Off he goes, and one can imagine him telling his tale at the next meeting of sow bugs, looked up to by the younger generation as an insect who has made it. And yet mixed with his smugness is a little disappointment. Now that he has come out on top, life seems aimless. Maybe he will return in the hope of repeating his triumph. It might be worth marking his back with ink so as to recognize him if he risks it. A courageous animal, the sow bug. No wonder he has survived for millions of years. Ricky Shore. Hi, Alex. Good, Joe. I love this. Sounds like a fascinating book. You could apply his ideas about alcoholism to substance abuse in general. Indeed. Yes. Yeah, this book is very interesting. Games people play. And I'm just reading one section about life games. There are marital games. There are sexual games, underworld games, like all kinds. It really makes you think about the roles we take on in society and yeah, what's going on in a lot of people, the reasons why they choose to do what they do. I mean, like this debtor thing. This is so interesting. Most young Americans, however, take their mortgages very seriously only in times of stress. If they are depressed or the economic situation is bad, their obligations keep them going and may prevent some of them from committing suicide. Most of the time, they play a mild game if it weren't for the debts, but otherwise enjoy themselves. Only a few make a career out of playing a hard game of debtor. Try and collect is commonly played by young married couples and illustrates how the game is set up so that the player wins whichever way it goes. The whites obtain all sorts of goods and services on credit, petty or luxurious, depending on their backgrounds and how they were taught to play by their parents or grandparents. If the creditor gives up after a few soft efforts to collect, then the whites can enjoy their gains without penalty, and in this sense, they win. If the creditor makes more strenuous attempts, then they enjoy the pleasures of the chase as well as the use of their purchases. The hard form of the game occurs if the creditor is determined to collect. In order to get his money, he will have to resort to extreme measures. These usually have a coercive element, going to White's employers or driving up to his house in a noisy garish truck labeled in big letters, collection agency. At this point, there is a switch. White now knows that he will probably have to pay, but because of the coercive element made clear in most cases by the third letter from the collector, if you do not appear at our office within 48 hours, White feels, I'm not familiar with this word, peremptorily. Is anyone familiar with this word? Let me look it up. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Peremptorily, in a way that expects to be obeyed immediately and without any questions. Peremptorily. Okay. He feels, this is how we learn new words, right? Reading. You want to expand your vocabulary? Read. White feels peremptorily justified in getting angry. He now switches over to a variant of, now I've got you, you son of a B. In this case, he wins by demonstrating that the creditor is greedy, ruthless, and untrustworthy. The two most obvious advantages of this are, one, it strengthens White's existential position, which is a disguised form of all creditors are grasping, and two, it offers a large external social gain, since he is now in a position to abuse the creditor openly to his friends without losing his own status as a good Joe. He may also exploit further internal social gain by confronting the creditor himself. In addition, it vindicates his taking advantage of the credit system. If that is the way creditors are, as he has now shown, why pay anybody? Creditor, in the form of try and get away with it, is sometimes played by small landlords. Try and collect and try and get away with it players readily recognize each other. And because of the prospective transactional advantages and the promised sport, they are secretly pleased and readily become involved with each other. Regardless of who wins the money, each has improved the other's position for playing. Why does this always happen to me after it is all over? Okay, so then, Okay, interesting. So yeah, why does this always happen to me is another game. Money games can have very serious consequences. If these descriptions sound facetious, as they do to some people, it is not because they relate to trivia, but because of the exposure of trivial motivations behind matters people are taught to take seriously. Antithesis. The obvious antithesis of try and collect is to request immediate payment in cash. But a good try and collect player has methods for getting around that, which will work on any but the most hard-boiled creditors. The antithesis of try and get away with it is a promptness and honesty. Since try and collect and try and get away with it players are both professionals in every sense of the word, an amateur stands as much chance playing against them as he does playing against professional gamblers. While the amateur seldom wins, he can at least enjoy himself if he becomes involved in one of these games. Since both are by tradition played grimly, nothing is more disconcerting to the professionals than to have an amateur victim laugh at the outcome. In financial circles, this is considered strictly out. In the cases reported to this writer, laughing at a debtor when one encounters him on the street is just as bewildering, frustrating, and disconcerting to him as playing anti-schlemiel is to the schlemiel. We skipped over the schlemiel game, but that's a very interesting one that they talk about in this book. And it, again, schlemiel is one of those, when you meet one, you know. You know. Okay, so the third game we're going to talk about is Kick Me. Thesis. This is played by men whose social manner is equivalent to wearing a sign that reads, "Please don't kick me." The temptation is almost irresistible, and when the natural result follows, White cries piteously, "But the sign says, 'Don't kick me.'" Then he adds incredulously, "Why does this always happen to me?" Clinically, the "why does it always happen to me" may be interjected and disguised in the psychiatry cliche, "Whenever I'm under stress, I get all shook up." One game element in why does this always happen to me comes from inverse pride. My misfortunes are better than yours. This factor is often found in paranoids. If the people in his environment are restrained from striking at him by kind-heartedness, "I'm only trying to help you," social convention, or organizational rules, his behavior becomes more and more provocative until he transgresses the limits and forces them to oblige. These are the men who are cast out, the jilted, and the job losers. The corresponding game among women is threadbare. Often genteel, they take pains to be shabby. They see to it that their earnings, for good reasons, never rise much above the subsistence level. If they have a windfall, they are always enterprising young men who will help them get rid of it, giving them in return shares in a worthless business, promotion, or something equivalent. Colloquially, such a woman is called mother's friend, always ready to give judicious parental advice and living vicariously on the experience of others. Their "why does this always happen to me" is a silent one, and only their demeanor of brave struggle suggests "why does this always happen to me." An interesting form of "why does this always happen to me" occurs in well-adapted people who reap increasing rewards and successes, often beyond their own expectations. Here, the "why does this always happen to me" may lead to serious and constructive thinking and to personal growth in the best sense, if it takes the form of, "What did I really do to deserve this?" Okay, so now we're going to talk about number 4, "Now I've got you, you son of a bee." And I like this game. This one I recognized in quite a few people when I first heard of it. Thesis. This can be seen in classic form in poker games. White gets an unbeatable hand, such as 4 aces. At this point, if he is a "now I've got you, you son of a B" player, he is more interested in the fact that black is completely at his mercy than he is in good poker or making money. White needed some plumbing fixtures installed, and he reviewed the costs very carefully with the plumber before giving him a go-ahead. The price was set, and it was agreed that there would be no extras. When the plumber submitted his bill, he included a few dollars extra for an unexpected valve that had to be installed, about $4 on a $400 job. White became infuriated, called the plumber on the phone, and demanded an explanation. The plumber would not back down. White wrote him a long letter criticizing his integrity and ethics and refused to pay the bill until the extra charge was withdrawn. The plumber finally gave in. It soon became obvious that both White and the plumber were playing games. In the course of their negotiations, they had recognized each other's potentials. The plumber made his provocative move when he submitted his bill. Since White had the plumber's word, the plumber was clearly in the wrong. White now felt justified in venting almost unlimited rage against him. Instead of merely negotiating in a dignified way that befit the adult standards he set for himself, perhaps with a little innocent annoyance, White took the opportunity to make extensive criticisms of the plumber's whole way of living. On the surface, their argument was adult to adult, a legitimate business dispute over a stated sum of money. At the psychological level, it was parent to adult. White was exploiting his trivial but socially defensible objection position to vent the pent-up furies of many years on his cozening opponent, just as his mother might have done in a similar situation. He quickly recognized his underlying attitude, "Now I've got you, you SOB," and realized how secretly delighted he had been at the plumber's provocation. He then recalled that ever since early childhood, he had looked for similar injustices, received them with delight, and exploited them with the same vigor. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I'm having a moment. I deal with this all the time in my work, like for real. People will knowingly do the least, get the least, and then explode, you know? And it's like the pent-up fury of forever just comes out of them. It's ridiculous. In many of the cases he recounted, he had forgotten the actual provocation, but remembered in great detail the course of the ensuing battle. The plumber apparently was playing some variation of "Why does this always happen to me?" "Now I've got you, you SOB" is a two-handed game, which must be distinguished from "Ain't It Awful?" In "Ain't It Awful?", the agent seeks injustices in order to complain about them to a third party, making a three-handed game: aggressor, victim, and confidant. "Ain't It Awful?" is played under the slogan "Misery Loves Company." The confidant is usually someone who plays "Ain't It Awful?" "Why does this always happen to me?" is three-handed too. But here the agent is trying to establish his preeminence in misfortune and resents competition from other unfortunates. "Now I've got you, you SOB" is commercialized in a three-handed professional form as the Badger game. It may also be played as a two-handed marital game in more or less subtle forms. Antithesis. The best antithesis is correct behavior. The contractual structure of a relationship within "Now I've got you" USOB player should be explicitly stated in detail at the first opportunity, and the rules strictly adhered to. In clinical practice, for example, the question of payment for missed appointments or cancellations must be settled clearly at once, and extra precautions must be taken to avoid mistakes in bookkeeping. If an unforeseen contretemps arises, the antithesis is to yield gracefully and without dispute, until such time as the therapist is prepared to deal with the game. In everyday life, business dealings with "now I've got you, USOB" players are always calculated risks. The wife of such a person should be treated with polite correctness, and even mildest flirtations, gallantries, or slights should be avoided, especially if the husband himself seeks to encourage them. Man, that is like people like set up situations like just to have a game to play. It's very interesting. They'll like put you in a position to flatter their wife, right? A man will put you in a position to flatter his wife, and then when you do, then he's like, it's real out here. Okay. Analysis. Thesis. Now I've got you, USOB. Aim. Justification. Roles: victim and aggressor. Dynamics: jealous, rage. Examples: 1. I caught you this time. 2. Jealous husband. Social paradigm: adult, adult. Adult: see, you have done wrong. Adult: now that you draw it to my attention, I guess I have. Psychological paradigm: parent, child. Parent: I've been watching you, hoping you'd make a slip. Child: you caught me this time. Parent: yes, and I'm going to let you feel the full force of my fury. Moves: 1. Provocation, accusation. 2. Defense, accusation. 3. Defense, punishment. Advantages: internal psychological, justification for rage. 2. External psychological, avoids confrontation of owns deficiencies. 3. Internal social, now I've got you, USOB. 4. External social, they're always out to get you. 5. Biological, belligerent exchanges, usually ipsexual. Ipsisexual? I need to look that up. Existential, people cannot be trusted. What does ipsisexual mean? Let's look that up. This is why I like reading these older psychological books, or just in general older books. I like ipsisexual. It's not even coming up. Let's see. Wanting to form a sexual relationship with a boss. And that is biological belligerent exchanges, usually ipsisexual. Okay. Oh, interesting. Is there a word for animosity towards the unmarried? Psychiatrically, this can be called ipsisexuality. A high percentage of adults don't like this, particularly this is like give me a moment. I don't think I can find the original comment. Okay. Too bad. I'll have to look that up. But interesting term, huh? Okay. We're almost to, we got another thing to read, but Ricky has a comment. All of my clients fall into these categories. So do I, to be fair. These games we play, the masks we wear, they are all but required. Yeah, I'm less of a game player now than I used to be. I can see like times I played like Now I've Got You, USOB, or like Deader I played, when I was younger. Most of the time I don't like them though. I think reading this book like made me dislike them even more because I crave real intimacy. Like, I don't know. But it's good. I'm revisiting this. Okay, so 5, the game See What You Made Me Do. Ooh, look what you made me do. Thesis. In its classical form, this is a marital game, and in fact, it is a 3-star marriage buster. But it may also be played between parents and children and in working life. First degree. See What You Made Me Do. White, feeling unsociable, becomes engrossed in some activity which tends to insulate him against people. Perhaps all he wants at the moment is to be left alone. An intruder, such as his wife or one of his children, comes either for stroking or to ask him for something like, "Where can I find the long-nosed pliers?" This interruption causes his chisel, paintbrush, typewriter, or soldering iron to slip, whereupon he turns on the intruder in a rage and cries, "See what you made me do!" As this is repeated through the years, his family tends more and more to leave him alone when he is engrossed. Of course, it is not the intruder, but his own irritation which causes the slip, and he is only too happy when it occurs, since it gives him a lever for ejecting the visitor. Unfortunately, this is a game which is only too easily learned by young children, so that it is easily passed on from generation to generation. The underlying satisfactions and advantages are more clearly demonstrated when it is played more seductively. Second degree, See What You Made Me Do. If See What You Made Me Do is the basis for a way of life, rather than merely being used occasionally as a protective mechanism, White marries a woman who plays, "I'm only trying to help you," or one of its relatives. It is then easy for him to defer decisions to her. Often this may be done in the guise of considerateness or gallantry. He may deferentially and courteously let her decide where to go for dinner or which movie to see. If things turn out well, he can enjoy them. If not, he can blame her by saying or implying, "You got me into this," a simple variation of "See What You Made Me Do." Or he may throw the burden of decisions regarding the children's upbringing on her, while he acts as executive officer. If the children get upset, he can play a straight game of See What You Made Me Do. This lays the groundwork through the years for blaming mother if the children turn out badly. Then, See What You Made Me Do is not an end in itself, but merely offers passing satisfaction on the way to "I told you so" or "See what you've done now." The professional player who pays his psychological way with See What You Made Me Do will also use it in his work. In occupational See What You Made Me Do, the long-suffering look of resentment replaces words. The player democratically or as part of good management asks his assistants for suggestions. In this way, he may attain an unassailable position for terrorizing his juniors. Any mistake he makes can be used against them by blaming them for it. Used against seniors, blaming them for one's mistakes, it becomes self-destructive and may lead to termination of employment or, in the Army, to transfer to another unit. In that case, it is a component of "Why does this always happen to me?" with resentful people, or of "There I go again" with depressives, both of the "kick me" family. Third degree, See What You Made Me Do. In a hard form, See What You Made Me Do may be played by paranoids against people incautious enough to give them advice. See, I'm only trying to help you. There it may be dangerous, and in rare cases, even fatal. See what you made me do, and you got me into this. Complement each other nicely, so that the see what you made me do, you got me into this combination is a classical basis for the covert game contract in many marriages. This contract is illustrated by the following sequence. By mutual agreement, Mrs. White did the family bookkeeping and paid the bills out of the joint checking account because Mr. White was quote unquote poor at figures. Every few months, they would be notified of an overdraft, and Mr. White would have to square it with the bank. When they looked for the source of the difficulty, it would turn out that Mrs. White had made an expensive purchase without telling her husband. When this came to light, Mr. White would furiously play his "you got me into this," and she would tearfully accept his rebuke and promise it would not happen again. Everything would go smoothly for a while, and then a creditor's agent would suddenly appear and demand payment for a long overdue bill. Mr. White, not having heard of this bill, would question his wife about it. She would then play her "see what you made me do," saying that it was his fault. Since he had forbidden her to overdraw their account, the only way she could make ends meet was by leaving this large obligation unpaid and hiding the duns from him. These games had been allowed to go on for 10 years on the basis that each occurrence would be the last, and that from then on it would be different, which it was for a few months. In therapy, Mr. White very cleverly analyzed this game without any assistance from the therapist, and also devised an effective remedy. By mutual agreement, he and Mrs. White put all charge accounts and their bank account in his name. Mrs. White continued to do the bookkeeping and make out the checks, but Mr. White saw the bills first and controlled the outgoing payments. In this way, neither duns nor overdrafts could get by him, and they now shared the budgetary labor. Deprived of the satisfactions and advantages of "see what you made me do, you got me into this," the Whites were at first at a loss, and were then driven to find more open and constructive types of gratification from each other. Antithesis. The antithesis to first degree "see what you made me do" is to leave the player alone. And to second degree "see what you made me do," to throw the decision back on White. The first degree player may react by feeling forlorn but seldom angry. The second degree player may become sulky if he is forced to take the initiative, so that systematic anti-see what you made me do leads to disagreeable consequences. The antithesis to third degree "see what you made me do" should be put into competent professional hands. Partial analysis. The aim of this game is vindication. Dynamically, the mild form may be related to premature ejaculation. All right. The hard form to rage based on castration anxiety. It is easily acquired by children. The external psychological gain, avoidance of responsibility, is prominent, and the game is often precipitated by the threat of impending intimacy, since the justifiable anger offers a good excuse for avoiding sexual relations. The existential position is "I am blameless." All right. So, yeah. Games People Play by Eric Berne is a reading from this book. This is Eric Berne, published in 1964. Quite a groundbreaking work of psychology on human relationships. And quite an interesting group of games that we have discussed here today, wouldn't you say? And a few in the chat have mentioned relating to some of these games. I know I find some of them familiar, And definitely as you go about your life and you notice people, you will often find that they are playing these games. And recognizing it can give you the power to not play the game, or at least to play it to your own advantage. So I highly recommend picking up the book and reading it all for yourself, because there's more games to uncover. And even in the book itself, they could only cover so many games. But when you kind of look and analyze people's behavior and that kind of thing, you find that a lot of the times, people are unconsciously playing games to give themselves more of a thrill, to add some drama, excitement, and flair to their life, and to deal with these underlying existential issues and neuroses. So anyway, that was all I wanted to get on and share with you today. Thank you for being here, listening, and I will be back another time, probably soon. All right. Farewell.